Hello, everybody. Good morning to folks that it's still morning, afternoon to folks that are joining us East Coast on the States or all around the world. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. We are at the top of the hour, so we will give a few minutes for everyone to hop into the session itself. See a lot of folks joining right on time. Thank you so much for being here. We're excited for today's conversation. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a lot of great content that we want to make sure that we can cover. So we will give a few seconds for folks to join. If you are here already and you're getting set up, go right into Zoom to the chat section of the module. And our icebreaker question today is your favorite childhood TV show, the one that you could not live without, that when you think about it brings you back to those Saturday mornings or whenever you watch TV. I love it. We've got some good answers already. Blue's Clues, Lost in Space, Brady Bunch, Rocket Power. These are amazing. Full House, Dora. I like it. We're getting some really good answers in here. This is really nice. All right, we're about a minute in, so I'm gonna allow us to jump into the content itself. Keep putting your answers into the chat. Armani and I will answer in a second as well. What a good way to start our final customer conversation of the year. This is awesome. I'm going to have to go back to this chat and get a lot of TV recommendations. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited for this session today. We've got a few things that we want to make sure that we're able to get into, but first, the rules of the road. It seems like a lot of you already know how to use the chat, so that's amazing. Make sure you continue to use the chat bar to chat with us here on the panelists and host side, but also your fellow attendees. If you need to, you can go into the bottom and click to everyone instead of to just the panelists and the host to make sure that you're sharing this with everybody. I'm seeing a lot of great responses in here. If you do want to chat just with us, you can choose chat with the hosts and panelists, and Armani and I will make sure that we answer any questions that you have. Speaking of questions, we do encourage folks to use the questions in the Q&A toolbar in the Zoom chat. Why? It helps us stay up on the questions that you all ask. We have a lot of folks that are joining live today. We want to make sure that we can get to everything that you may ask. So make sure you drop any questions that you have that you want us to respond to within the session itself in that Q&A toolbar. Finally, a lot of us always ask, I do every time I join a session, is there going to be a recording of the session? Because we want to make sure that we take notes. We want to make sure that we're participating. There's a lot to go into. We will share the recording about 24 hours after this wraps. So check your email inbox after we hop off to about this time tomorrow, and you will see an email from us with the recording, as well as resources and any links that we talk about throughout the session itself. So we'll make sure that you have everything covered. All right, let's get into who is here today. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. So happy you're here. We do these monthly customer conversations with members of Bitly and the QR code generator product. We're super excited to have all of you here. My name is Luke Reinebo. I'm the Senior Director of Customer Marketing here. I use the pronouns he and him. And joining me today is Armani Glaspie. Armani, why don't you introduce yourself?
Here we go. Hello, everybody. It was great getting to see everybody's favorite cartoons growing up. Kind of brought me back. Even though I look young, I'm a little bit older than you might think. But I'm happy to be here today, guys. I'm a product marketing manager here at Bitly. I'm excited to really talk about QR codes today and see, the beautiful things that we're doing here at Bitly, but also just talk about QR codes as a whole and the strategy and everything behind it. So I'm really excited to get a chance to speak with you all and just really looking forward to it. Please continue to stay active in the chat. We love hearing you guys talk or seeing you talk.
Yeah, I love it. Armani, you're not going to dodge a question. What was your favorite childhood TV show growing up?
Childhood TV show. I'm just gonna go with Dragon Tales. That was one of the favorite shows. Would always watch it at my grandma's house. It came on right after like a soap opera. Like I don't remember which one the soap opera was, but Dragon Tales was right after it. So
I love it. Dragon Tales is a really, really good one. I like it. I'm going to follow that theme. So my favorite one growing up was Dragon Ball Z. So Dragon Tales, Dragon Ball Z, a little bit more on the anime side, but it's something I watched, I think, every week when it came out. It was an awesome show. Hey, keep these suggestions and these ideas coming in. I'm seeing a lot of Land of the Lost. I love it. This is great. This is awesome. Let's keep talking in the chat. We're going to get into the content itself because we've got about 40 minutes where we want to cover a lot of great topics, ideas, inspiration for you all of how we can think about how we can make QR codes stand out more. First and foremost, though, I want to set the stage a little bit. And if you've been with us before, you've seen this. And the reason why I'm sharing it again is because when we asked you all about 6 months ago what you wanted to hear about and what you wanted to chat about with your fellow customers of Bitly and QR code generator, we heard a lot about people saying, love Bitly, I use it for this use case, or I'm really using QR codes in this way. But time and time again, we heard, I'd like to hear inspiration. I'd like to hear ideas because I feel like there's so much more I could be doing with the platform. And the top things that we heard from our customers when we asked, what are you using it for? Tell us a little bit more about how you're putting Bitly and the connections platform to work for you. What are the types of things you're trying to accomplish? These four main things came up time and time again. First and foremost, people wanted to connect with their audience. Second, they wanted to activate their brand. Third, they want to be able to track the connections. And I saw some great questions submitted ahead of time around how I track and understand what's working and what's not. We see that a lot from people. And finally, folks wanted to scale their efforts. They wanted to make sure every time they needed to create a new short link, a new QR code, a new link in bio page, it didn't take them the same amount of time every single time. They wanted to make sure that they were being effective and efficient. So what are we talking about today? Because the connections platform can help you with all those things. Well, we're really focusing on the bottom left part today to talk about how QR codes can help make sure that you can create stronger connections, that you can activate your brand, that you can track your efforts, you can scale up. That is really what we're here to talk about today. So let's ground ourselves. QR codes, what are they? What are they used for? We probably don't have that question anymore. We probably see QR codes everywhere. Over the last couple of years, we've either been putting them on everything that we can. We've seen them out in the wild. The most common use case we heard about a couple of years ago was restaurant menus. It's really grown. But the one thing that we see time and time again is that although QR codes are everywhere, not every one of them is effective. Not every one of them is getting the scans that we want them to. Oftentimes, we might see them in our day-to-day and say, I don't really know what I should do with this. And we kind of go on by and we miss that scan moment. So Armani and I want to talk a little bit about the different ways you can think about QR codes differently. So Armani, why don't you talk to us a little bit about maybe why we should take one step back and think about QR codes and making connections differently?
Yeah, most definitely, most definitely. And I mean, right now, before we dive all the way into that, we could really just talk about, some of the things that we're doing currently with QR codes. I mean, you think about the links to social media using those QR codes. That's something that really allows people to get that connection with their customers and really allow them to foster that. You can even take it to the point of connecting with your audience. You're able to go and share videos that might be on YouTube or social media, might even be able to share that link in bio. Additionally, with that, you're also able to do those how-tos. You're able to really take a step back and show your customers how they're going to be able to create something with your product, how they're going to be able to make a dish with your product, whatever the case may be. But it's just a really great opportunity to understand that QR codes are meant to be the call to action. I know that there's probably a lot of marketers in here right now, but a call to action is really what we want. We want people to click that button. We want people to perform that action. And think of these QR codes as that call to action in real life. You're able to do all of these scenarios right here by scanning that QR code. That's your CTA. And I know we talked about tracking and measuring, which is all available to do. But you got to take it a step back before you start off with all of this and ask yourself why you're creating it. But this is just really good examples of what you're currently doing right now and kind of what we're seeing out in the wild, as you would say.
Love it, Armani. And one thing you framed up is really taking that giant step back to think about what is my strategy for what I want to do with the QR codes. And then we go outside this, let's call it diagram, to understand what are the different use cases of where I can put a QR code to work for me. As long as I'm thinking about what am I doing that's inside, right? Am I connecting with an audience, answering questions, giving feedback, things like that, and then surprising and delighting your overall audience and your fans. So you've talked to me a little bit about, as we walk through this, of how you make sure that people are thinking about this a little bit differently, of kind of, we've taken that giant leap back in terms of strategy. Now I want to think about, do we need a QR code in the first place? How do you think about this?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just have a little story to start off with here. If anybody has kids or has been around a kid, one of their favorite questions to ask is why? Why do I have to do that? Why do I have to go there? Why do I have to brush my teeth? Why? They have a million whys. And it should be the same thing as you're creating a marketing strategy and especially creating a QR code. Why are you creating that in the first place? what is the target audience? Like, who is this going to be for? And what is the goal that we want to have with that? If you're creating something that's just going to be going out into the ether and you have no intentions of understanding what the goal was or understanding the success of it, you're really just creating something that is going to be a moot point. It's not going to do anything that you want to do for you. And if it is, you might not even be able to tell. So when you're creating these QR codes, it's important to take that step back and really just do the marketing one-on-ones, is understanding that target audience. Where are they at? You know, what are they looking for? Are they in restaurants? Are they watching TV shows? Are they reading magazines? Like, where are we going to actually place this QR code? Now, what is the goal? Like, what do we want them to do from this? You know, we take that a step back and we talk about the call to action that we talked about earlier. We want that QR code to be that call to action. So what are they going to do when they scan it? Are they going to a web page? Are they going to be going to a fill form so that they can get more of their information? Do you want them to watch a video? There's so many other things that you can have that should be tied to this at the very beginning and not after it's been created. Now, lastly, is how will you measure success? Now, this is something that I fall short on myself in product marketing at times, is going back and checking the metrics. This should always be something that you have at the top of your mind when you're using short links, QR codes, link in bio, whatever the case may be. Make sure that you are measuring that success so that you can reiterate on it and keep it pushing and get those results that you want moving forward. So long-winded, but those are the 3 questions that I would ask if I was creating a QR code myself right now.
Spoken like a true marketer. Who are we targeting? What's our goal? And how are we going to measure it? I think that's great. I'm glad we're grounding there, because we often hear these questions from customers of, do I need a QR code, or how do I make this change to the QR code? We often recommend take one giant leap back and think about what's the best place for it. Now, you've talked a lot about the different ways that people can use QR codes. And one thing I want to bring us back to is the time of year that we're in. We're at the end of the year for everybody. For some folks, we're in holiday swings for any campaigns that we have. Do you have some recommendations for folks on how that they can think about QR codes around the holidays?
Yeah, most definitely. I have 7 examples here that we can just briefly go through, starting at the top with the discounts and coupons. Now, you know, creating these QR codes and offering these holiday discounts or special offers really encourage the customers to scan for those holiday deals when they're at stores or when they're online. Additionally, you can have those virtual holiday catalogs. So you're able to generate those QR codes and put them on magazines, put them on promotional materials that you might send out in the mail, or you might even send out a short link to some people that you have within your email database. This allows for that easy browsing and that easy purchasing of your product itself. Now, one of my favorite ones is festive interactive window displays. I know it's a mouthful, but if you're like me, we go to the mall and we walk around, we look and we window shop. That's what a lot of us do before we go and actually purchase it. Now, a fun way to actually get those would-be shoppers or window shoppers like myself to engage, place a QR code in the window, have them have an interactive experience. It might be like a shoe company that allows you to virtually try on the shoes on your own feet. Or it might link to a fun page where you can see a lot of similar items instead of having to go into the store and, you know, feel the pressure of like you have to buy something. And then last but not least, another one of my favorites, because I love to eat, is the holiday recipe cards or tips. Now, this is something that's really cool as well. If you are a food company, a beverage company, or whatever, you can have a fun little holiday drink, a fun holiday meal, and you can have some fun holiday tips for how to wrap the present, maybe what color would look best on a present, you know, just make it fun. And so these are just a few examples of what I'm seeing in the market, and also of things that would really attract me as a consumer. So I hope that you guys really get something out of these. And if you are using QR codes for the holidays, take a look at these 7. Maybe one of them will be good for you.
I love it. The fact that QR codes are so easy to create after we've answered the 3 questions that we identified beforehand. It is something that folks can roll out, whether it be in person, with anything that you have with people coming into a store or a storefront. It can also be put on any marketing materials that you're still planning. So these are really good reminders for any end of year campaign ideas. I'd encourage everybody to jump into the chat. Savannah had a great suggestion here. Great for contest entry submissions too. That's an awesome example. We've got a few more. You can scan this QR code right on the presentation. Another QR code use case as you're doing education, learning, you want to share resources with folks. I'm going to drop the link into the chat as well. So if you need some more inspiration, you can go and check that out. But keep putting your own inspiration into the chat as well. Before we jump into a few best practices around how QR codes are being more effective, how we're seeing the most successful customers getting the scan volume that they want to see and getting the customer outcomes that they want to see, I want to answer a couple questions that we've seen come through and have been pre-submitted. So first and foremost, Armani, we're talking a lot about how QR codes are really effective. We had a couple questions both in the chat today, but also sent ahead of time about QR code hesitation. So the specific example we saw was that there's hesitation by some in the real estate industry to fully embrace the QR code regarding the security of it. Recently, there have been some targeted scams and the scanner is redirected to a nefarious site. How can people create a QR code that stays secure? We can make sure that we calm the concerns. We might talk a little bit about this with one of our main topics, but what are your top of mind recommendations for folks to make sure that there's trust baked into that scan that the customers take?
Most definitely. Well, we are here at Bitly, and one of the things that we have is very good security and trust for our QR codes. And now, what do I mean by that? First of all, we have the two-factor authentication. So there's not going to be somebody that's hacking into your account, going in and creating a different backlink to the QR code that you created. So we're getting that out of the way immediately. On top of that, if there is something like that that were to happen at any point in time, which there should not be, then you can also go in yourself and change that backlink and get it back to the direction that you want it to go into the right landing page. So we really make sure that here at Bitly, that starting with that two-factor authentication, that you aren't going to have to worry about that. So we're handling that on the front end. Now, in the off chance that somebody does get that password and everything that you have, you still have the ability to go back, change that, and get to the right page that you want for yourself.
I love it. That's great. We've had a couple other suggestions come through within the chat that's similar to what you shared as well, making sure that, and actually one of the suggestions is something we'll chat about in a second. So why don't we just jump right ahead to that? Keep the best practices sharing going on in the chat, and a friendly reminder, if you do have some questions you want us to answer throughout the session, please drop it into the Q&A tab. It's a little easier for us to keep up on and make sure I can tee it up for Armani. If we don't get to folks' questions, we're going to follow up with everybody that asked a question in the Q&A tab. So have no fear. We'll make sure that we answer your question in case it's a little specific to your use case or it's not something we're able to get through throughout the session. So make sure you keep dropping them in. Before we jump into the next though, Armani, one of the things that I wanted to bring us back to is effectiveness with the QR codes. We want to make sure these things stand out and then they actually achieve the goals that we want. And so you put together some thoughts around how people can do that based on what we're seeing from best practices for those that are having success with QR codes. So can you walk us through a little bit how you think about how QR codes can be more effective?
Absolutely. So I know how everybody loves things that are clear and concise. So I'm just going to give you something that are what we call the 3 C's: clear, customize, and compelling. Now, the first one is clear. You want to make sure that these QR codes are easy to scan and easy to see. For example, you look behind me, you look at the white wall up there. You don't want to put something there that's going to be white, that doesn't have a lot of contrast. You want something to have some color. Since we're here at Bitly, it could be the color that I have on, like this shirt, something that's actually going to be able to be recognizable and noticeable. Now, that also ties into the next point of making it customized. So brand identity, brand loyalty, brand awareness is something that is becoming more important than ever as we've gotten in past the post-pandemic phase. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of similar competitors. So what are you going to do to make yourself stand apart? You're going to have a really good brand. And if you have a really good brand, you should use that brand using Bitly's QR codes. You're able to go in and you're able to put in your brand color, your brand logo, and make it to where if you are a customer, somebody familiar with that brand, you're going to see it, you're going to notice it, and you're going to scan it. It's very similar to what Nike does with the swoosh. Anytime you see the swoosh, you know it's Nike. It should be the same thing for your brand itself when you're using QR codes or anything for that matter. Now, the last one is to make it compelling. You want to make sure that you have good messaging around the QR code. Right now, you see a lot of QR codes that say scan me or things like that, which is literally telling you what you should do with the QR code. But there's also other ways that you can make it more compelling. You could say enter here for a contest, as we saw earlier, or you could say scan here for discounts. Like make that QR code something that I'm going to look at and I'm going to say, hey, I need to know what this is. I'm going to go scan it. And so just to back up again, the 3 C's is making it clear, customized, and compelling. 3 really good ways to make your QR codes more effective.
I love that. And we're going to walk through some examples of each as well as some real life examples in a second. So I'll go into the first one. So one of the first C's are your codes clear? We're asking a lot of questions today. We'll make sure that we send out this list of questions to folks after the fact in the email that we send you with a list of how you can think about your strategy properly. And then the questions you want to ask yourself to make sure that these are clear. Really important that you can make sure that you do that. So the first thing that I want to talk about is making these codes clear. As you can see in this example, this is a non-traditional place to put a QR code. This is actually on a product on the tag. We're going to talk about different ways that we're seeing folks make QR codes even richer with the data a little bit later in our conversation. We talk about the future of QR codes. This is a pretty simple one, right? But the code is pretty clear, right? It's in a very clear place, and I see instructions of what I should do in order to get more information on it. And so when it pops out at me of like, oh, there's a QR code on, looks like this is a blanket or something. If I scan this, I'm going to learn more about this product, learn more about the what goes into it, maybe where it came from, all of that kind of stuff. A great example of making sure a QR code can stand out, but it's still very clear what the action is that you want folks to take. I will say we see a lot of people in industries who share with us that their audience maybe isn't quick to adopt or adapt QR codes. They're not as sure. And let's think about it. It kind of takes a lot to pull out your phone, pull up the camera, hover over a QR code, click the link. We're asking a lot of consumers. So making sure that you follow each of these steps is really helpful to make sure that people are actually taking the action you want them to see. Making it clear is super, super important.
Beautiful. And so the next part here is making your QR codes customized. Now, we talked about this a little earlier, but the question here, again, we have a lot of questions for you guys, and I'm hoping that it's making you think. And it seems like it is because you guys are really answering in the chat. But what and why am I going to do when I notice it? Like, why am I noticing this QR code here? Are the colors popping out at me? Is the brand really showing? Is it something that's really going to entice me to want to scan this? The second question is, what am I doing or feeling when I see it? I come from a sociological background, so we talk a lot about pathos, ethos, logos. And so right here, we're really talking about pathos. What is that feeling that we have when we see that brand? What is that going to make me want to do? If I see it, am I going to want to scan it? When I see a Nike logo anywhere, I do want to scan it and I do want to know what's happening. And it makes me want to go work out, do something athletic, whatever the case may be. What emotions does that evoke? And I know that might sound kind of crazy when you're thinking about a QR code. You're like, dude, you're talking about a box. How is it going to make me feel anything? But it can, because that's our job, is to make that QR code something that entices you, makes you feel something. And if we can do that, we can do anything. Now, the last one is, does a QR code reinforce the expectation of your brand? Again, this is really talking about that brand loyalty, about that brand engagement, about that brand awareness. When you're talking about customization, think about brand. That's really it. Use those logos, use those colors, make it pop, make it stand out, and make it unique.
Love it. That's amazing. Thank you, Armani. Final C that we want to chat about, except I did see someone dropping it in the chat. There should be a fourth one, concise, which I agree with. And I think Armani used the concise word a little bit earlier too. So that's a great call out. But how do we make sure that these are compelling? We talked a little bit how we can make sure that they stand out. I walked through a little bit of the process of what we're asking customers in our audience to do in order to scan a QR code. And like we mentioned, we've seen them everywhere. So making sure that people actually take the action is important. So how do we make sure that they're compelling? Here's an example of you're giving a very clear expectation of what people can get if they do scan. You're making that promise and you're setting expectations. So also, although we see some examples here of it being very clear, we see some examples of making sure that it is customized. I'm also seeing examples in here of making sure that it's compelling. I know what will happen when I scan this QR code, and not just from the trust and safety perspective, but I know what I'm going to get. So making sure people understand why they would take out their phone again and they'd scan something like this is super important. The other side of it, which maybe is counterintuitive, that these two are two ways to make it compelling, is create some surprise, delight, and some actions around scanning a QR code that people might not expect. And so we have to balance that with how much are we making sure that people understand where they're going. But there's something to you taking out your phone and scanning something and getting a delightful experience. This could be a website page or a landing page that you point them to that greets them in a different way based on where they scan. It takes them greetings. I'm in Chicago. It might say greetings to our Chicago audience or something like that because I scanned that specific QR code. That is giving me some sort of payoff after the fact. And I like to think about this of how are we making sure that the post-scan experience reinforces what we want people to experience when they scan our QR code. They either get what they're looking for or they're surprised in a really delightful way to make sure that they scan QR codes moving forward every time they see it from you. You want to make sure you're reinforcing that behavior. So making sure your QR codes are compelling is super, super important. I see a ton of great examples into this resource throughout the chat. So if you check this out, you can see a lot of other examples that people are using QR codes for. Make sure you check those out. Armani, before we jump into inspiration, why don't we take a couple questions? Does that sound all right?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, cool. Michelle had asked if we're going to show how to customize a QR code with a logo. We're not actually going to show a live demo with that throughout the session today, but we are going to make sure that we send out a resource so folks can see within Bitly, within the QR code generator product, how you can make sure that you bring to life your QR codes. That is inclusive of making sure that you put the branding and logo and things like that on it. We've got some questions in here around recommendations for the size of a QR code. We actually saw this come up in the pre-event form as well. So Armani, any recommendations of how big or small we should be making our QR codes?
Well, typically it needs to be big enough to catch your eye. And I know that's a very vague question, but if we're putting it on clothing items or things like that, we typically say something like 4x4, but that's on like a packaging or a product itself. But as you get into bigger things like flyers and things like that, it really just needs to be something that's noticeable. You don't want it to blend in with the text. You don't want it to be something that people just kind of skip over. And so I would just say, really just use your own fruition there, use your own thought processes there to really understand, how big it needs to be, depending on what item you're putting it on. You just want it to be noticeable. And I think that's the most important thing.
Love that. That's great. We have some questions from folks that they submitted beforehand around tracking with QR codes. So someone had asked, they want to create different codes that track different print products. They have 3 different variations of a postcard, and they want to track the winning design. How might you recommend that they do this?
Yeah, so I would say using the Bitly Analytics tool, you're able to go in and look and see which of those are performing at a higher level. And when you go into that, you can see the number of scans, you can see where they're being scanned at, and you can really break that down as granular as you need to understand which one is working and then kind of come up to the conclusion as to why. And that really sounds like a really cool experiment, by the way. It's kind of giving, like an ABC testing, which is super cool. And I'd be very curious, whoever asked that question, if you do go and do that, please reach out to us. We'd love to know, what the results of that were and kind of how that process went. But yeah, just go to that analytics dashboard. You'll be able to check each link that you have, each QR code that you have, and you'll be able to see the success of them and be able to compare them.
Awesome. Final question before we jump into some inspiration here. And like I mentioned, please keep the questions coming through the Q&A tab. We'll make sure that we address everyone that we can. And if we don't get to your question, we'll follow up with everybody who asked one in the Q&A tab. We did have someone ask if they could get a download of the chat after the fact. Although we cannot share the chat file itself, we'll do a summary of all the different inspiration and questions that people had asked throughout the chat. So 1, keep that inspiration coming, but 2, you'll get a resource tomorrow in your email that'll include all the different examples, ideas that people had. Final question before we jump into some inspiration and our next segment here, Armani. Someone's wondering, what do you think the top 3 uses of QR codes are for small nonprofits?
That is a really good question. For small nonprofits, I think one would be just scanning to get donations. I feel like that would be a really good one off the top of my mind. Another one would be scanning to get information about the nonprofit itself. You want to direct people and get them a chance to understand what the mission is, what the vision is, and things like that. And then a third one that would be a top use case for nonprofits. Luke, I'm gonna ask you to help me out with that last one.
Thank you. You're teaming me up. So one of the nonprofits that I work closely with here in Chicago, we've actually chatted about QR code use cases. And one cool thing I've seen them do is they have a lot of calls for volunteers, and they work with a lot of different community organizations. And so being able to put a QR code somewhere where someone can scan to find volunteer opportunities or to get information sent to them about upcoming volunteer opportunities meets them where they are. They might be at the local YMCA, they might be at another community organization, they might just be running throughout their day running errands. I can take a scan and then I can follow up on it after the fact. So we see a lot of folks who are, again, kind of bringing it back to the nonprofit strategy. How do you raise funds? How do you generate volunteers? And how do you create awareness? So Armani, I think you nailed it.
Beautiful. Appreciate that. Because I got stumped. They got me, guys.
All right, let's jump into our next section. And again, keep the ideas coming in the chat. Keep the questions coming in the Q&A tab. I'm loving seeing all this. This is amazing. All right, we want to talk through a little bit of inspiration. Armani, I'm going to tee it to you first.
Yeah, so live events and that second screen experience. I don't know about many of you, but I'm a very big sports fan. Have a jersey behind me on the wall over there. I played football in college. So, as I started working for Bitly, I really started to see QR codes everywhere. As it is when you start working at a company, you start seeing more of that product, more of the competitors, wherever you are. Now, one place that I noticed it a lot was at the bottom of the screen on NFL Sundays. It would have a QR code that's linking you to the team website, that's linking you to the jersey, that's really trying to keep you engaged while watching the football game or being in the commercial break. Now, the really cool thing about this as an advertiser, as a media marketer, anybody like that, when people are watching TV, when it goes to the commercial, the first thing that you do is look at your phone. Nobody really cares enough. Oh, go Frogs. I love it. Nobody really cares enough a lot of the times to watch the commercials unless you're watching the Super Bowl, which this will come into play with that as well. But when you see that QR code and you already have your phone in your hand, it keeps those consumers engaged. And it also gives you another way to track the success of your media placement, your ad placements, see how much the engagement really is. Using that QR code placed strategically, whether it be on a billboard, whether it be placed in the middle of a TV show, whether it be anywhere like that that's interactive. And so this is something that I've been seeing a lot of. And I think that it's a really super cool use case that, we're going to continue to see a lot of. And it's cool to see people take advantage of it.
Love it. That's a great example and a great way that we can really tie that. Like we have those phones in our hands when we're watching live events, really anything that we're watching on TV, right? So how can we make sure we create the most engaging experience around it? I'd bring us back to those 3 C's that you walked us through as well, making sure in that second screen or driving back to making sure that it's clear, it's customized, it's compelling. I want to chat a little bit about one of the stories that we've told on the Bitly blog recently, which is around our Imagine the Possibilities campaign. And this first one is around Daily Harvest. And one way that they put QR codes to work is really around introducing the brand to a lot of different folks within the retail experience within grocers. As you can see, they've got a ton of branding that they invested a lot of time into making sure that people understood who and what Daily Harvest was. And so how do they make sure that people could walk away from that experience in a really compelling way? I actually bring it back to our nonprofit example a second ago. I might be walking through the grocery store. I've got my checklist. I want to make sure that I'm seeing and I'm feeling like I'm making progress here. I might pass this and I either recognize this brand or maybe I don't. But I take this scan and it takes me to a place where I can understand more about who the brand is, what the ingredients list is, what their story is, and I might read that right away. Right? I might need that gut check to say, oh yeah, I do believe in what Daily Harvest is all about, and I want to make sure that I'm grabbing and trying a couple of these products. I might take that with me, which reinforces the experience that folks have. So when we think about what Armani walked through in terms of customization and the feeling that we have, putting that into a really great place where people can scan it and bring it with them can help extend your brand experience outside of that one moment that they might pass an ad that you have.
Beautiful. So the next example that we have is for a company called Curology. Now, Curology was founded in 2014, and they had the vision of making effective skincare more accessible. So since then, their team has dramatically grown. They have in-house licensed dermatology providers who really provide that personalized skincare to more than 5 million patients. Actually, starting in 2023, they became available at Target. So they're doing pretty well. Now, one of the things that they're doing for their QR codes and to really make the offers compelling for their customers is being able to really make sure that they're fostering those personal connections and not having the process of being a customer stop after purchase. So whether it's modifying a subscription or directly messaging their licensed dermatology provider, Curology is using these QR codes to spark a wide world of possibilities for its patients. Now, one of the quotes that they have that's in this case study is that we believe that skincare should be personal, and QR codes allow us to extend that philosophy into the physical realm. They're basically our call to action button in real life. There's no better way to connect with our patients when they're not online. And I know that we talked about that a little bit earlier about it being the call to action in real life. Curology is one of those examples of how that is actually working, and they're seeing some great results from that. So if you want to know more about them, please go check them out and see what they're talking about.
Awesome. I love that example. Thanks for walking through it, Armani. Our final inspiration example that we want to chat through before we go into our final section as we think about the future of where QR codes are going and answer a couple of the questions that have come through, because I'm seeing a lot of great ones in here. Kind of brings us back a little bit. So we've seen a lot of chat and questions around how can we put QR codes to work in our normal day-to-day flow, the things we're already doing. Let's say we're not building a big advertising campaign. We're not building a big brand activation. We just want to make some things easier on our end, but also for our audience. I saw someone mention in the chat that how do we think about employees and the in-office experience? I would say that often is our audience. Audiences aren't just defined by our customers. It's any audiences that we're trying to reach and connect with. And so one way that we've seen people be really effective with QR codes kind of feels like a very low-tech way, but it's for events, it's for check-in, it's for connecting with other folks that might be in that space. And so let's place ourselves either in a classroom experience or someone is coming into the office and need to be able to check in or find out, I don't know, what's for lunch that day or what food trucks are driving up outside that they can go hit up. Having that really quick, easy way for someone to scan the QR code and either check in, find the resources that they need for the event or the conference that you're hosting, or to even see the menus or the food trucks that are pulling up around noontime, that really becomes super important for you to be able to create that connection. One, because we're all using our phones all the time, so it's quick and easy to do, but it also allows you to understand what are people actually engaging with. You have the analytics on the back end if you're using those dynamic QR codes to understand what are people scanning, how often are they scanning it, what are your peak times when people are really curious about what the lunch menu looks like, things like that. So really easy to put QR codes to place it or in place in different ways to make sure that you can actually drive a lot more connection with your customers in a way that doesn't have to cost a lot and doesn't have to be really complex. Let's jump into a little bit around the questions that we have. And so I'm going to go to the next slide. So there's some there's some uses and tips here on this slide. Again, you can scan this QR code or click on the short link. I'll drop the short link in the chat as well. It is case sensitive. So if you do copy and paste it, make sure that you're following the case sensitivity of this. But again, scan it or I'll send these links out after the fact as well. I want to make sure that we answer a couple of the questions that came through Armani. So first and foremost, how do QR codes fare in comparison to other marketing strategies, such as Google Ads, social media posts or videos, influencers? Do you have a thought or perspective on that?
Could you repeat that question for me, Luke?
Yeah. How do QR codes fare in comparison to other marketing strategies, such as Google Ads, social media posts or videos, influencers, etc.?
I mean, guys, it really just depends on who your target audience is what I would say to that. I think it is a item that is good in unison with all of the things that you just said. I think QR codes by themselves are powerful, but QR codes when used in a marketing campaign or an ad campaign or used with an influencer, like those things just make QR codes that much better. So I would think of a QR code as not standalone. And I would think of even QR codes that Bitly is not standalone. QR codes are really good for going to the link in bio that we have here. It's also really good for directing and redirecting short links. So I think QR codes are a kind of a glue, but not necessarily what you're going to use to make everything stick, if that makes any type of sense. And then Luke, there was one question that I saw, and I saw a nice little thread going on, and they were talking about how do we get individuals that are not as tech savvy to really use QR codes? And I think that's a wonderful question. I think some of the things that were being said were maybe at the parks and rec, and then at the library as well. And now to answer that question, my dad, and he has a larger audience of older people at his church. And so they aren't the most tech savvy people. But when we're giving an offering, we actually have a QR code at the front of the church that people go and they scan. But we made sure to educate them beforehand. And we also, again, go back to that 3 C's, make it clear, concise, and compelling. We want to say that we make this so easy that your grandma can do it and so easy that your kid can do it. So it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. You want to make sure that it's so compelling, so clear, and so concise that you really are able to reach that audience. And if it does require a little bit more education, that goes into maybe the messaging behind it. If you have a QR code and you have a larger audience that doesn't understand how to use it, maybe make the QR code giant and then maybe put next to it, scan here to get XYZ. Just make it a little bit more hand holding if you are having that issue with getting people to scan it. Would be some options that I would have for you.
I love that. Easy enough for a grandparent, a kid, and everyone in between. That's amazing. And this is a really good example. I'm seeing a lot of other folks hop into the chat as well to share their examples, whether it be in church, nonprofits, or other audiences that maybe aren't as familiar with QR codes, and teaching them and educating them on how to scan. That's really great. Jeremy brought up something around avoiding user frustration. Bring us back to that post-scan experience. Make sure there's payoff. Make sure it's clear on the front end of what we're asking people to do. Really, really cool. All right, we've got some more questions, but I know we had 45 minutes total. I want to make sure we're able to talk about the future of QR codes and where they're going. We had a few comments and questions throughout of talking about what more can folks do with QR codes and the data, and what is encoded into the QR code itself, which, Armani, I know you've got something really exciting to chat through. So why don't you take us into kind of where the future of QR codes are going?
Beautiful. And yes, I'm so happy to talk about this. And just to tee this up, and we're almost done, and we'll get into the questions. But in the spirit of the holiday season, we just got done with Thanksgiving. And at Thanksgiving, there's the turkey, you have the ham, you have the greens, you have sweet potatoes, you have all the food. And then at the end, you have the dessert. So this here is the dessert. And now with any dessert, you can't have too much of it. So this is really just a teaser, a sneak peek into something that we have here at Bitly that we're offering, and really excited to be bringing this to you guys. So just bear with me for about 3-4 more minutes, and we're excited to get this going. So first off is, what is GS1? Now, GS1 is a not-for-profit organization that is essentially the FDA for barcodes. So they assign barcode numbers to products. If you have a product yourself, if you're a small business owner, a large business owner, or you work at a large corporation, you might be familiar with them if you're working with packaging and pricing and things like that. Now, they work closely with industries like retail, healthcare, transport and logistics, food services, and technical industries. Just really think of GS1 as the barcode company. I'm going to tell you why that matters. So you might be used to seeing these. I know we've all seen them because we all go and buy things. Now, that number at the bottom here is the GTIN number, or the Global Trade Item Number. Now, this is what allows you to understand what the product is, what the price is, where it's coming from, really get all of that supply chain information, and let the checkout system know which product that you are purchasing. This is what is in phase right now. But by 2027, GS1 is requiring all retailers and all products to go to what is on the next slide, which is a 2D barcode. Now, this 2D barcode is able to store information horizontally as well as vertically. Now, why is this important? This means that if you're Amazon and you're getting your package, sometimes the box is dinged up, whatever, that's actually very hard for them to scan. With this barcode, with the different checks and balances within it, you're able to scan that any which way. So even if it's damaged, they're still going to be able to scan it, which streamlines the supply chain and gets it to you in the time that you want to get it. Because I know that we're standing outside looking for the package, looking for the truck, and we don't want to have to do that. And with these 2D barcodes, it makes it a lot easier. Now, this 2D barcode, what makes it different than a QR code, and I want this to be very clear because it is a little bit confusing. What makes this different than a QR code is that GTIN number. That GTIN number is the number that is going to make it a 2D barcode because you're putting in that product information. So as we move forward, what are some of the key benefits of this? You're really able to enhance the customer experience. So you're able to give them access to product information. If you're going to Best Buy, you buy a TV, you scan the TV, and you are able to go to a web page that tells you how to set it up, that tells you even some of the things and apps to download. That's something that's made possible with this barcode. It also is able to create more opportunities for you to have brand engagement. Again, we've talked a lot about the brand engagement today and about really having that brand loyalty. And lastly, it improves that inventory management for retailers and suppliers. You're going to be able to track this from beginning to end, and it's really going to be something that's very powerful and very much like the Chipotle commercial in the Super Bowl last year, from farm to table. It's something that 2D barcodes are really trying to implement and trying to do. That quote there, you're able to read yourself, but those are some of the benefits that we have of 2D barcodes and some of the things that we have coming down the pipeline here.
I love it, Armani. And so there's a ton of stuff that can be stored in a 2D barcode, which we've had some questions throughout the session around. How can QR codes in general, and in this case, 2D barcodes, go even further? So what are some callouts that you would have of things that you're seeing folks start to adopt of what they're embedding and encoding into the 2D barcode itself?
Yeah, so I think a really good example is what Puma is doing with sustainability. They're really showing where these products are coming from, how they're being made, and really keeping the consumers in the know. And then also another really cool use case, in my opinion, is the expiration dates. If you go to Whole Foods and you pick up some milk that is close to expiration date, you get up to the checkout line, they scan it, and they're able to see that, hey, this is about to expire. We can give you a discount on it. I think that's another really cool edge use case that's happening with this. But there's so much more that's going to be going on, so many more communications. But just wanted to give you guys a little sneak peek into what's happening.
I love it. That's great. First of all, I'm seeing some like copywriting happening in the chat. This chat is lit today. Thank you, everybody. This is amazing. I want to leave you before we get into some final questions, and we'll go a few minutes over to make sure we can address some. And then, like I said, we'll follow up with everybody that asked a question throughout today's session. So thank you for keeping them coming. If you are currently on QR code generator, you can go and start to create 2D barcodes within the product itself. So go check it out, log into your account and check out the different ways you can start creating them. You can start to embed some of the information that Armani had talked about. If you're a Bitly customer, we do want to hear from you. We want to build this with a lot of folks in a little bit different way. And so you can scan this QR code. They'll take you over to Natalie. She's our 2D barcode extraordinaire, and she's willing to have any conversations with customers that want to learn a little bit more and want to be part of helping to shape where we go with 2D barcodes as an overall function. We want to make sure that these are as impactful for all the different industries that are going to put them into practice. So you can scan the QR code, you can type that short link in there as well, and then I will make sure I shoot it out to everyone after the fact too. Okay, we've gone a little bit over as we address questions throughout. I do want to make sure we can get to a few of the questions that came through. They were kind of broad-based and helpful for everybody. We had one question that came in from Daniel. He was wondering about using QR codes on images that we post on LinkedIn. A little bit of context that he had shared. LinkedIn, oftentimes the algorithm maybe puts links further down and doesn't get as much reach as it does before. We see a big trend of images becoming an image posts and carousel posts and all the stuff that we're seeing on LinkedIn becoming more impactful. So if we aren't spending on PPC, if we aren't spending on social ads, can we put QR codes in those images, Armani? And do you expect that you'd see any kind of like decrease in reach that we would have because there's a QR code on it itself?
If I'm thinking of that on LinkedIn specifically itself, I could see it happening and see you putting it in there, but I don't necessarily know if you're going to get the results that you want. Because if I think about myself in the way that I use LinkedIn, I'm on there and I'm scrolling on my phone itself. I don't necessarily know if I would go and get something else to scan that QR code. So I actually don't think that LinkedIn would be the best place for that. But I think that even if it's not a QR code, that would be a perfect place for a short link, is to put that there instead of the QR code itself. Now, when you get into things like Instagram, I think that people do use that on their laptops, on different types of platforms or different types of mediums. And so I think Instagram could be a really cool spot to put QR codes because people share that out a lot. And it could be a really good use case. But yeah, in my opinion, I think LinkedIn would be kind of questionable. But if it does work, I would be very curious to see how and what it was that caused it to work.
Yeah, it's the age-old question. Do we put links and QR codes on social media? I know we talk about it a lot. I think, Daniel, you were digging in a lot around kind of does it get downgraded overall? That's definitely something interesting to dig into in terms of testing. Do we see get more reach or less reach, and what kind of scans? The beauty of using a Bitly QR code is you can see the metrics on the back end to understand, does it get more scans? I'd say any place that people are trying QR codes, make sure it's clear, make sure it's customized, make sure it's compelling, right? It's not necessarily about the avenue that you're putting in, it's making sure that you're reaching our audience in a way that they would be interested in being reached. We had another question around Canva. People are wondering if it integrates with, so Bitly, if you're a Bitly user, you can integrate Bitly and Canva together to be able to create QR codes within Canva itself, to be able to access your QR codes that you created in Bitly from Canva. And you can see the data and analytics within Bitly to make sure you can track there. So if you are a Canva user, make sure you make the connection between the two. I'd also love to hear from folks that are using both to understand a little bit more about how you're using it. We can continue to innovate on the product. So that's a really good way to think about it. Final question that we're going to get to, and then we're going to drop because we are a bit over. Like I said, the Q&A has been amazing. We're going to follow up with everybody that did ask a question that we weren't able to get to. I am going to summarize and share out a lot of the key themes and recommendations that we saw in the chat. So this is really amazing. Here's a fun one, Armani, wondering if a QR code can be embossed as opposed to printed. Do you have any recommendations around making sure that QR codes can be readable in different formats?
Ooh, and go. Oh no,
Embossed, yeah, embossed.
I don't even know what that word means. Somebody educate me.
I don't know either. I was hoping you did. So different printed materials. I have actually seen some QR codes that were created outside of just being printed on a piece of paper or something like that. I think as long as the different components of the QR code can be read, it can be. Highly recommend that people test it. I've seen people creating 3D QR codes in different ways, people creating QR codes that also have an element of Braille so they can be read in a different way. Like people are getting really creative with QR codes. Try it out. Make sure you test it. Armani, go.
I think that's super cool. I didn't know what embossed meant. I was on a webinar trying to teach y'all something today, and y'all taught me something. So I appreciate that a lot. And I just want to drop this link in here, the Canva one. Can you integrate Canva with Bitly? Because I saw the question there. I just dropped it in the chat. Please go and check that out so that you can go and learn more about how to be able to integrate with Canva. But that embossed QR code, I think I'm going to be thinking about that because seeing something that pops out at you kind of like 3D or something, a different format, I think is actually pretty cool. And I would do that.
I love it. We learn from our friends that are a lot deeper into design and understanding printed and all of that. So this is amazing. Okay, I'm going to wrap us for a bit over. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. This has been a really fun conversation. This is our final one of the year. We are going to pick them back up in January. And so as you exit the session, a couple questions will pop up that will prompt you to share any thoughts that you have of sessions or topics you'd like to hear more about. So make sure you drop us just a quick note of what you want to hear about. We will be following up with everybody with the recording, with the resources, with links of ways you can put this into practice. A bit of a summary from the chat today, because again, this chat was lit, and we'll follow up with everybody that had a question in the Q&A tab to make sure you get the answers that you need. So thank you, everybody. Armani and I are here. If you need any help with anything as it relates to Bitly or the QR code generator product, let us know. We're happy to help. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you in your inbox in about 24 hours, and happy QR code creating and scanning. Thank you, everybody.